Why is this not working? It is working? Wait, can you guys see me? I can't see me. Okay. I'm on. It's working. Okay, well, it looks to me like it's not working, but obviously it is. So I'm just going to trust you guys on that. Weird. I have no idea why I can't see myself, but I guess that's not something to be concerned about. So let's go ahead and get started here. So we're going to talk about hope today, hope and hopelessness. I have a plan for what I think will probably take maybe about half of the time for this stream. I have some pre-planned stuff for you guys, and then I'll definitely have some time for some Q&A at the end too. Thank you so much for letting me know it's working. So I want to start by talking a little bit about my personal and professional background and what brought me to the mindset and the framework that I have around hope. And you guys probably know one of my big cornerstones of the way I see people and mental health and just the world in general is I do not believe that anybody's beyond hope. I don't believe in untreatable mental health conditions. I don't believe anyone is so far gone that nothing is ever going to get any better. But I know that just me saying that doesn't necessarily change anything. So I want to explain a little bit more about why I believe that. And some of it comes from my own life and just things I've been through. Some of it comes from the work I've done with other people as a psychologist. So I'm just going to let you guys in on a little bit more of the backstory to why I see things the way I do than what I've shared on this channel before. So I'm going to start with the personal side of things, because the personal kind of flows into the professional. I know I have not had the hardest life in the entire world. I have no illusions about that. I also know that I am not like the most high functioning or the most successful person in the world. So I can't lay claim to owning either end of the extreme continuum of humanity. I do think that I have about as wide a gap from my lowest point to my highest point as anyone that I've known. I've been a lot of different places in life, functionally speaking. And I think that's given me just a little bit of a different perspective on things. Going back to when hopelessness and helplessness really first hit me, I think a big part of it, at least for me personally, was I looked at the world and I looked at the lives people had and things that people were doing in their next phases in life, like late adolescence, early adulthood, middle age. And everything I saw seemed to fall into one of two categories. Either people had a life that maybe looked like something I would really like to have someday, but it was so far away from the life that I was actually living that I thought it's never going to happen for me. That's never going to be attainable for me. I don't get to access this. It's just out there, and that's the way it's going to be. Or the lives that I saw people living that I thought potentially were attainable to me, like I could get to that point, they didn't look worth living to me. I couldn't see anything that I wanted in the world. And I guess the simplest way I think I can explain that part of it is the realization I had is the person I want to be doesn't exist. Like I don't have a blueprint out there. I don't have a mentor. I don't have a role model. There's nothing I see that looks like what I want to get to. And that was a huge source of my discouragement for quite some time, is I just didn't think a worthwhile life for me even existed. There was not any one particular thing that happened or any one particular thing that I did that changed that for me. It was a gradual process with many steps. But I know that what first started to break me out of that was when I started to look at really non-traditional lifestyles. And I know that might seem a little ironic because you guys kind of know how that, well, not how the story ends, I guess, because I'm still alive, but you guys know where the story goes up until today, which is that in many ways I am living a fairly traditional lifestyle, but that wasn't the plan for a long time. And once I started looking into kind of alternative ways of living, I started to see some hope there. Like maybe I can configure some really atypical set of variables and basically create a path forward for me that doesn't make me miserable, that no one else has ever done before. I felt like I'm going to have to carve my own place into this world because there's not one ready-made for me. I'm not just going to be able to step into this sort of predetermined life path that hundreds or thousands of people have traveled before me. I just knew that wasn't going to work. So I essentially, this is a goofy metaphor, and I know you guys like my goofy metaphors though, so I'm just going to roll with it. In the Elder Scrolls games, which I know some of you play, it's a game where you get to create your own character. And there's 3 ways you can create a character. You can either just answer a bunch of sort of like almost MMPI, like personality inventory type questions about like, what would you do in this situation? I see that some of you got the reference. I appreciate that. You can answer these questions and the game will just tell you like, okay, you're going to be this class of character. Like you're going to be a warrior, you're going to be a mage or whatever. You can also pick from pre-made classes. So the creators of the game made a bunch of certain class, like sets of skills and attributes that went together and said, you can be one of these. The third option, which was the most advanced and the most difficult option, and of course the one I always chose, is that you can create your own class, meaning you can just customize these abilities and these traits in any way you want and just create whatever you want. And I realized like that's basically how I'm going to have to live my life. I'm going to have to make sort of a create a character kind of life. I certainly did not know how I was going to do that, whether that was even possible, what exactly it was going to entail. But when I started thinking about it that way, like I might be able to bring like a little bit of this, a little bit of like this person, I like this part of this person's life, but not that part. And I like this part of this person's life, but not that part. Maybe if I can just bring together a lot of the different parts of various lifestyles that appeal to me, maybe I can create something that actually feels like a fit, because nothing I can see out there feels like a fit. That's really where my hope started in my personal life, was seeing myself as almost like this create a character type thing. I'm gonna skip a little bit more of the personal section here now and go into professional, and we'll kind of go back into some of the personal later. But fast forward about 10 years. We're at the point now where I've finished most of my education. I'm starting my internships in psychology and in mental health. Some of you may know this already, but there are many problems with my field. One of the problems with my field is that for interns who have minimal experience and minimal training, it's this tricky thing, right? Because like we got to get people experience. Everyone has to start somewhere, but you also don't want to negatively impact the progress of clients, right? So what happens a lot of times for therapy interns is that they stick clients who are thought to be essentially beyond help or stuck or untreatable with an intern. And this is not my perspective, okay? This is just how my field works. It's very harsh, it's very callous. Essentially, the line of thinking is this person's not going to get better anyway. So a brand new therapist who doesn't really know what they're doing yet probably isn't going to cause any harm. Like they're not going to make things worse because this person is just where they're going to be. And so that was my caseload. All these, supposedly untreatable, treatment resistant, ambivalent, stuck people. And meeting these people who behind closed doors, my colleagues would describe as like willful, treatment resistant, never going to get better. SPMI is the term that gets used a lot. SPMI is an acronym that stands for severely and persistently mentally ill. And to me, it always basically just sounded like they're saying you're perma-screwed, like nothing's ever going to get better for you. So I have this SPMI caseload, and my first thought upon meeting these people is like, these people remind me a lot of me. Like I just vibe with these people. I just get along with these people, and I don't find their perspectives or worldview to be unrealistically pessimistic or wrong. Like I think we share a lot. Like we have a lot in common. And I don't know if it's because of that or just because I never treated them as hopeless. And I, despite the fact that I was told like these people aren't going to get better, I never treated them that way. I was always skeptical. I'm just a naturally skeptical person. I was like, okay, we'll see. And a lot of the people on my caseload who were supposedly never going to get any better started to get better. And so then my colleagues and supervisor were like, what the hell is happening here? This isn't really what we expected. Maybe we should give you some more people like this. And so my caseload grows with these supposedly SPMI treatment resistant people. And I'm not saying this trying to make myself sound awesome or anything, but I was continually able to help these people who our system basically said, like, don't bother, just do your best, just go in there and wing it. That's not what I did. I would really listen to them. I would try to understand their worldview. A lot of them did not like traditional therapy techniques. And frankly, I related to that. And they'd be like, hey, this part of cognitive behavioral therapy is stupid. All these, I'm quoting someone right now, all these cognitive distortions are just variations of the same theme. Like they're not really that different from one another. And I'd be like, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right. Our field is not perfect. We have a lot to learn. Let's work on this together and see what we can figure out. And it really threw a wrench into my entire worldview, because what I was told to expect for these people as far as prognosis was completely different than what ended up happening. And I just kept trying to figure out, I essentially was like trying to reverse engineer the therapy techniques I was using with these people that were actually creating some sense of progress, and then trying to duplicate that with more and more people. And it just, I'm not saying I had a 100% success rate or anything like that, but for the most part, it just kept working. I don't know how much of that was the specific techniques I was using with them, or how much of that was the mindset, because it's so easy to fall, especially when you're young, when you're an intern, when you're inexperienced, and someone tells you, hey, this is what to expect. Like, this is the way things are going to be with this person. I think the natural inclination is to, agree with the superior, to fall in line with what this person with, 30 years of clinical training or whatever has told you. And to just subconsciously assume, like, yeah, that's what it's going to be. But that's why we have things like double blind studies, because we know that the expectations of the people involved in the treatment can actually change the outcome of the treatment. And so this was like probably the first time in my life when my natural skepticism and general resistance to authority actually worked for me rather than against me. And we actually started to get somewhere. And it just brought me back to, like, the only person who didn't give up on me was me. And I wish I could tell you guys exactly how and why that is. But I think the power of just having even just one person in this world, especially someone who you somewhat respect or consider to be a reasonably wise person, saying to you, hey, I don't think you're hopeless. I know how you've been treated. I know what you've been told. And to some degree, I probably even know what you think about yourself and what's going on inside for you here. But I don't think that's the case. I think that there is tremendous reason for you to have hope, and I think we should keep trying things. So that's just kind of the background. That's the backstory. I know there wasn't a lot of specifics or techniques in there, and we're going to get to that shortly, but I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit about where this worldview and where this style of therapy comes from for me. So the next thing I want to talk about, as far as kind of pre-planned information, that perma-screwed thing is really going to catch on, isn't it? That wasn't necessarily my intention. I didn't even know I was going to say that until today, but we should probably trademark that or something. Sorry. Now I'm distracting myself. I want to talk a little bit about some of the beliefs that typically create a sense of hopelessness in a person. I know it's not possible to make a fully exhaustive list of these things, but there are certain, I don't want to say complaints, because it's not, that sounds negative. There are certain things I hear people say, either in therapy sessions. I see a lot of you guys say this, like in comments, repetitive trends for like why I am the exception, and why, even though you seem like the smart guy who kind of knows what he's talking about, I still think the rules are different for me. And I am the one person who is beyond hope. I believe in all of you, but I don't believe in me. And probably the biggest reason why I see people say that is that I've tried everything. Like I can't even tell you how many times I hear people say I've tried everything. And I know you think you have. I know. And you have tried a lot. I'm sure you have. So have so many of my therapy clients. Like, they don't come in. I am never someone's first, almost never someone's first therapist. I am usually someone's like fifth, sixth, seventh therapist, because they have tried a lot. They've tried many therapists, they've tried many different orientations, and people come to me when they're usually at the end of their rope. And so that's kind of my niche, and that's kind of what I've carved out for myself. So when I say you haven't tried everything, I don't mean that disparagingly. I don't mean like, oh, you haven't done crap. It's not that. It is literally not possible, though. It's not possible to have tried everything. And I say that for two primary reasons. One, I've said this before, okay? So I might be repeating myself, but this is a message worth repeating. How many variables do you think there are in your mental health? Like, what I mean by that is internally and externally. So your internal variables would be like your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, your physical health, your memories. These are all important factors in your mental health, right? External variables is basically the entire world. That's like someone said at least 50 plus. It's probably like 50 million for real. I'm serious. Where do you live? What do you do for a living? Who is around you? Like, when do you sleep? What do you eat? These are all like, they have almost an infinite array of configurations. And that essentially was like my first revelation back around 17, 18, when I started to have the faintest glimmer of hope about my life, is I realized like there may not be sort of a pre-configured lifestyle that's set up properly for me, but there is functionally an infinite array of customizable variables that I could tweak that could change my life. And my belief was that there is a set of them that will be okay for me. And it might be a very unorthodox set of them. And it was. It might be a very non-traditional lifestyle. It might be a mix of things that has never been seen in any other person. But I believe that it exists. And I'm going to keep messing with stuff until I find it. But one thing I very do strongly believe is that mental health, especially for people who experience not mild symptoms, like moderate symptoms, severe symptoms, debilitating, disabling symptoms, sorry, allergies are bad today, is that it's not going to be one thing, okay? I think for anyone with substantial mental health issues, you aren't going to find like a miracle cure. You're not going to find a single thing that is the answer to all of your problems. I don't think I've ever seen that be the answer for anybody. And I think what it's going to be is every little thing that moves the needle a little bit for you is going to be part of the answer, but not the answer. And often what I see people do when they're trying various approaches, techniques, treatment strategies, is they go really hard on one thing for a while. Like maybe you find the research or your therapist tells you physical activity is amazing for depression and anxiety. And you're like, okay, I'm really going to try this. I'm really going to take it seriously. And you go hard at the gym, or you take walks every day, or you do whatever it is you're going to do for like, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and you really give it your all. Like you're trying your best, and you do feel maybe a little bit of a shift. Like I can tell this is doing something, but this is a dramatic lifestyle change for me. And the output, the change in my symptoms is not dramatic. It's like I feel it a little bit, but not a ton. And so after some period of time of sticking with that, you discontinue it because you say, well, that wasn't the answer. It helped a teeny tiny bit, but it didn't really solve my problem. And then you move on to the next thing. Maybe the next thing is you learn a lot about the link between nutrition and depression, or nutrition and anxiety. You say, okay, I'm going to work on my diet now. I'm going to, eat consistently, kind of clean up my diet a little bit. And you have the same experience. It's a lot of work. It's a pretty dramatic lifestyle change. You feel a little bit better, but not hugely, maybe 5% better. And so you say, okay, this wasn't the answer either. I guess I'm going to try something else now. And you try a lot of really good frontline important stuff, kind of one after the other. This is the most common pattern I see. None of those things were the answer, but anything that moved the needle at least a little bit, anything that helped you somewhat, was part of the answer. And I think because what it was, there was no one thing for me. I've told you guys a lot of the things, like when I make my videos about like what helped me with my depression, what helped me with my anxiety, it's like 6 things, 7 things. It's not the one thing. And even those 6 or 7, those are like the top 6 or top 7. It's not all of them. And what I think really most people need to do, and this is what I try to do with people in therapy, is you start with one thing, maybe something you've already tried in your past, something that's helped a little bit, but not massively. And you stick with that one thing for way longer than you did before. You stick with that thing long enough that it just becomes a normal part of your life. And it no longer feels like this weird thing you're doing, this big sacrifice. It just is like, okay, yeah, that's just a thing that I do now. And once it gets to that point, it's basically locked in. It's now part of your life. Now you add one more thing. You add the second thing that helped, and you wait. You don't mess with one thing at a time. And you wait until that thing kind of settles in, until that thing becomes a normal part of your life and your identity and your routine. And one by one, this is going to be a long process, you guys. I don't really believe in quick fixes in mental health for the most part, especially for those of us that are really down deep. This isn't going to be like change your life in a month. That's not real. And what it's going to be is like one little thing stacking on top of the other. It will take ages. You're right. This might take you 5 years. This might take you 10 years. It did for me. Technically, it will take you your entire life. You're never going to master this, you guys. You'll never like conquer your brain. This is a lifelong journey. There's always going to be a next step. There's always going to be something you can add. But don't let that trick you into thinking that until you get to like the top of the mountain, which you never will, that everything's going to suck permanently and everything's going to stay the same. Because every little thing that you add, every little difference that you can make in your life, everything that moves the needle, 1%, 2%, 3%, if you lock it in and stick with it, that stuff starts to stack. It's very similar to like the idea of compound interest financially. When I remember the first time I invested money, I invested $100, and it was in not a bond. I don't remember what it was in. Anyway, it's not the point. I invested like $100 after. Normally I'm the kind of guy who spends all my money, and I watch a little bit of Dave Ramsey, and I'm like, okay, time to invest. Invested $100, and I made the commitment to myself. I said, I am not going to look at this for a month because I know that it's going to be slow. Like, I'm not even going to check my progress. So I just left. I actually did it, which is amazing that I had that willpower, but I actually left it alone for a month. And I checked it. And after a month, I had $99. I lost $1 in a month. So things did not get better in a month. And I got pissed and I pulled all my money out and I bought a video game. I think. I don't remember what I bought. That's not the time frame in which you're going to see progress. And that's true with financial investments. That's also true with lifestyle investments. This stuff is going to take time. But like somebody said in the comments, it does get easier as you go. Anything you're doing, any therapy skill, technique, lifestyle change you're working on, your skill level improves the longer you do it. And the reward goes up and the effort goes down. Yes, this is a lifelong journey. It is. It absolutely is, because no one's life is ever going to be perfect. We're all going to have to keep fighting for as long as we're here. But that's actually not bad news. It's not. I know it sounds like bad news, but it's not. It means you got your whole life to figure this out. You're never going to master it. No one does. But every change you make that you can lock in, that you can really say, okay, I've got this part. I've figured out this part pretty well. This is part of the answer for me. Your answer might be 10 things. It might be 20 things. It might be 30 things. It's not fair. I know it's not fair. I would love to come on here and be like, guys, my laptop fell asleep. I want to come on here and be like, guys, there's one thing. If everyone just does this, everyone's going to be fine. But that's crap. That's not real. That's not how this works. You have to build your life around it. This is one of my core truths is this cannot be, I've probably said this before. I know I use a lot of video game metaphors. This can't be a side quest for you. Like, for real, this has to be the centerpiece of your life. If you have a debilitating mental health condition that can take you down, either like literally it can kill you, or it can get you to such a point where you're so disabled and debilitated you can't do anything, what's more important than managing that? Because that's the thing that can stop you from everything else in life. That has to be the center. It does. And that is how I live my life. And it works. It really does work. If you watched me, if I like live streamed an entire day of my life, I don't know that it would look super weird. I don't know that you'd see everything I do and be like, wow, his life is so strange. Like that's so foreign and unfamiliar. It's not necessarily that different. It's more just like, where is your focus throughout your day? I really do keep my focus in large part on my mental health and on my mental health needs. And every major decision I make in my day is from that lens of what do I need right now for my mood, for my cognition, for my health in general. And that's where the attention gets directed. It cannot be a side quest. This isn't like a little thing that you add to your life and everything changes. Now, I know you guys have jobs, you guys have families, you guys have physical health conditions, you guys have homes. I know. I know you can't just not do that stuff. It's not that I'm trying to add 10 hours of work to your day that's already crammed beyond the breaking point, because I know that's where you guys are at. I get that. It's more just like, where is the focus? And when you get to these branching decision trees, when you have to make a choice between something that would help your mental health and something that would not, just that you take this path as often as possible. And I say every time, now obviously that's idealistic. You're not going to do it every single time. I don't do it every single time. But even if you take the path that supports your mental health the majority of the time, greater than 50% of the time, things will change for you. I really, really believe that. I am so behind schedule right now because I had like 5 things I was going to talk about, and I've talked about one of them, and we're half done. The other one I definitely want to talk about, and it's sort of similar to what I said before. Probably the other biggest reason that I hear that people feel that they're beyond hope is when people say like therapy doesn't work for me. And it's sort of a similar answer to I've tried everything, which is that therapy isn't a thing. And what I mean by that is therapy is not one thing. And I know many of you have probably seen many therapists, tried many different therapeutic modalities. So I'm not suggesting that you guys like saw one therapist for like a month and bailed. I know that's not necessarily the case, but literally every therapist is different. Every style is different. Every session is different. And seeing even 3, 4, 5 therapists, honestly, and then saying, well, I guess therapy doesn't work for me, would be like dating 5 people and then saying, well, I guess I'm going to be alone forever. Like dating and relationships just don't work for me. It's not in the cards for me. And if you've tried therapy and therapy hasn't worked for you, what you have learned is that therapist did not work for me. That technique did not work for me. Or maybe that technique, when applied by that therapist, doesn't work for me. I know a lot of people who are so sick of CBT and so burnt out on CBT, and then they work with me and I do CBT a little bit differently. And they're like, oh, I don't hate CBT. I just hated the way everyone else was doing CBT before. It's all about fit. It's just like dating. It really is. And it's worth continuing to fight and continuing to look until you find something that clicks for you. It might take 15 or 20 therapists. I'm sorry if it does. Like, we have a lot of work to do on our end. There needs to be much better standardization of fit between therapist and client. It's one of the biggest frustrations I have with my field. Like, imagine if you had a medical condition, like a physical health condition, and you just got told like you should see a doctor. Hang on one second. Ads will run shortly for some viewers. No. What did I do? Skip ads. We don't need ads. Sorry about that. Imagine if you had a healthcare problem and you just were told, see a doctor. And there's like hundreds of different kinds of doctors, right? Which kind of doctor am I supposed to see? And they're just like, figure it out on your own. That's basically our mental health system. Like, you get referred for therapy. Like therapy is one thing. Therapy is not one thing. That's like being referred for medicine. There are many options within that realm, and we do a terrible job. We meaning professionals, not you guys, us. We do a terrible job of ensuring good client to therapist fit. And so for those of you that have seen therapist after therapist after therapist, I am so sorry that it's been this hard. I know it takes a lot of time. I know some people don't have awesome insurance. It's a messed up system. I am not here to pretend like that's not the case. But that doesn't mean you're beyond hope. It doesn't. That doesn't mean there's no one out there for you who's going to be able to help. I know that it's exhausting, and I know some of you are beyond sick of trying. But I don't believe there's such a thing as a treatment-resistant person or a person for whom therapy does not work for. And again, this goes back to my internship. I was told that those are the people I was getting, and it worked for them. So even if someone has literally told you, like, you are treatment-resistant, you are not a good fit for therapy, well, who the hell were they to tell you that? Like, anyway, there's one other thing I want to say, and then I'm going to make sure we get like 20 minutes or so for Q&A, because you guys have, I know you've been asking a lot of questions already. I promise I'll get to some of them. But the third thing I had on my list, third most common reason I hear people say they're beyond hope, and I've seen many of you in the comments state something like this, is it's too late. Like, I'm too old. Maybe if I'd started this earlier, or before I had accumulated so much trauma, or before these mental and physical habits were so ingrained in me, maybe at one point I could have got better, but not now. It's too late. I don't believe in that either. And I'm not saying that to be invalidating, but maybe it's possible for a person to have reached a place in life, whether that's because of what they've already been through or their age or how much time they have left. We're getting to like this really idealized outcome where like everything is awesome. Maybe, I don't know. I hesitate to even say that, but let's say I have a client who's 79. I mean, let's say you're in your 60s. Let's say you're in your 70s. There's no chance that anything gets even a little bit better. Why would that be any different? Don't forget that your brain has recency bias. Like, recency bias means that things that have just happened, things that have happened in your life recently, obviously, have way more bearing on your mindset and your worldview and your emotions than things that happened a long time ago. Your brain just considers stuff that happened recently to be way more relevant than stuff that happened a long time ago. So even if you've had 65 years of dysfunction and trauma and screw ups, if you have 5, not even good or great, but like okay years, it's going to change things. It is. And even if big picture, you know that you're not probably going to live long enough to where more than 50% of your life was good, is it not still worth it to do what you can to make whatever time you have left as good as it can be? I guess it's not up to me to tell you that. I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their life, but I think it is. And I'm working with people every day who agree with me and who are seeing progress and are seeing change and are whatever age or have unimaginable amounts of trauma. Like, I have people on my caseload who have been through so much trauma, I can't remember all of it. Like, there's things that have happened to them that for some people would be the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And for these people, it's like, they forget about it because it was like the 30th worst thing that's ever happened to them. It's so sad, but that doesn't mean that nothing can change. It doesn't. I had so much more I wanted to say. I'll probably have to do another one of these, but I want to actually get to some of these questions. So let me take a look at some of the questions you guys have typed in. I know there's a lot coming in. But I want to kind of make this last 20 minutes or so here a bit of a Q&A. Let's see. How is this not future faking? So is future faking, I actually, believe it or not, I've never heard that term. Is that the same thing as like fake it till you make it? I'm guessing that's the same thing, right? I don't like the term fake it till you make it, but there actually is some pretty legit science and methodology behind it. Basically, if you reframed fake it till you make it, it's essentially just saying you don't actually possess psychic abilities. and that your mindset probably does impact the way your life goes in the future to some degree. And I feel like neither of those two statements in and of themselves are fairly controversial. Like, would you guys all agree? No one actually knows what the future holds. And your perspective and your mindset probably can, to some degree, change outcomes, not in like a manifesting kind of way, but just in like a plausibility kind of way. Those both probably seem like pretty legit statements, right? So combine those two statements together, and what you have is what you believe is possible in the future affects what is possible in the future, which might get a little close to fake it till you make it. But that's really just a combination of two sound scientific principles. I hate most popular phrasings, like it gets better, makes my skin crawl. But fake it till you make it. I don't like the saying, but if you actually look at like the logic behind it, it's actually pretty sound. We can change what happens in the future through our attitudes, through our mindsets, through what we think is plausible. Just, I'll give you a super cheesy example, but when I first decided to leave my job, some of you have been here around long enough that you might have remembered that little ordeal. At first, I was absolutely terrified to even consider starting my own practice, which is what I ended up doing. And I was desperately like trying to find someone to work for because I didn't really believe in myself yet. And the idea of doing what I'm doing now scared the crap out of me. I was so nervous about it. And what started to change that for me is I downloaded, there's this podcast I listen to called Practice of the Practice. So it's about basically owning a mental health business. And on their website, they had a 27-step checklist for opening your own therapy clinic. And I remember seeing that and be like, is there a 5-step? Can I not do the 27-step one, please? But so I downloaded it, and it was a PDF. And I was like, well, just what if, right? Like, I'm just going to pretend I'm not going to do it. But like, if I opened my own practice, what would I do for all these 27 steps? Because it's things like, find an office, choose a liability insurance carrier, choose an electronic health record, all this logistical type stuff. Have a fax number, basic stuff like that. So I go through and I just answer all the questions of like, in this crazy alternate world where I actually open my own business, here's what I might actually do. But yeah, I'm not really going to do it right. So I fill it all out and I look at it. And I remember thinking, that doesn't look that hard. Like it doesn't look, it looks like a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't look impossible. But until I actually saw all of it put out on paper like that, it felt impossible. And I just treated it like it was impossible. And had I not changed my mindset around that by doing this little exercise, I'm probably an employee right now. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I really do believe that being able to look at it like that changed my outcome. And I think that that's true for all of us. So yeah, I do think mindset matters tremendously. Do faxes exist anymore? Kind of. They're mostly digital now. So I have a program called eFax. So it's basically just email, but it goes to a fax number. I'm not sure what the point of it is. I'll tell you who does still use fax, though, is Medicaid, and I take Medicaid. So I definitely still need to have fax. Hey, Scott, do you have advice for those of us who have financially plummeted while severely depressed and never had a safety net, people or money to begin with? Poverty is a hope and traction killer. Man, I know. I mean, the financial situation in particular is really, really rough right now. And I know that a lot of therapeutic interventions, and even like I really try to make sure that most of the things I recommend, both in therapy and on my channel, like are free or at least very cost effective. There's kind of like two different parts of this question. There's, can I treat my mental health without having much money? And like, can I live the life I want without having much money? The answer to the first question is yes. It's 100% unequivocally yes. Is that, I don't know if I said that right. That's not important. The answer to the second question is, I don't know, because I don't know what you're trying to do in your life. And I know that life requires money, but managing your mental health doesn't cost a thing for the most part, like other than, you know, therapy and medication possibly. But like physical activity is a good example. There are things you can spend, you know, you can buy fancy gym clothes and have a gym membership and have a personal trainer and buy supplements and all that. But like, or you could just do body weight exercises on YouTube in your home. I mean, there's a free version of virtually everything. Sometimes it's slower, less efficient, less quality. It may not be as good, but there are things you can do with little to no money. The majority of the people that I work with are in really difficult financial situation. I work with a few people who have like stable jobs, stable income. That's not the norm for the people we serve here at this clinic. So that's pretty typical. There's always something you can do. There are always free or low cost interventions, strategies, resources. It massively increases the difficulty level if you're in a really difficult financial situation, but it does not make it impossible. I know it's a really short answer to a really complicated question, but I'm just trying to get through multiple. Any advice for someone who has never found effective help? It feels impossible to try as nothing has ever been helpful. So here's something I didn't mention that might be worth mentioning. And this is going to make me sound like a little bit of a hypocrite, but I'm going to be honest with you guys. I've never worked with a therapist that I clicked with, really. I actually haven't done a ton of therapy, like as the client. I haven't gotten much out of therapy. I haven't seen a lot, even therapists I haven't seen, like supervisors that I've had or people I've worked with. These people who would, you know, call other people SPMI and say they were hopeless and stuff. I would look at what they brought to the table. I'd look at their skill set and I would think, yeah, I'm not surprised you see your clients that way, because you wouldn't have been able to help me at my lowest either. And I think for some of us, there is like an idiosyncratic piece to it where we sort of just have to look at what's happened up until this point and try to identify those things that did help, even just a little bit, and kind of try to like reverse engineer them to some degree and figure out, I need this from this, I need this from this, I need this from this, and almost like make your own recipe, you know? Maybe no one else can can connect all those dots for you or give you this exact blueprint for what you should do to get better. It might be something you have to do. But you can do that. You can. You can look back at your life and probably get a rough sense of good times and bad times, and like what were the active ingredients in both, and go from there. I know, again, way too simple answer to a very complicated question, but that's where I would start. And that essentially is my story. I'm not trying to like make myself sound awesome or contradict things I've said before. But most of what got me from where I was to where I am was mostly me. It was me working on myself. I didn't get a ton of professional help from other outlets. So although I think that helps tremendously, and obviously I strongly encourage people to go to therapy, you can do a lot without it too. So don't be afraid to try to put some of those pieces together yourself. DB, how is it possible to build meaning in life? Scrolled too far. If one cannot, okay, I can't figure out how to make it go back up. But I think it said, if one cannot feel joy or happiness. Well, meaning, that's a big question though, isn't it? You get to decide what a meaningful life is to you, right? I mean, I know that when you're experiencing severe anhedonia, when nothing feels good, when nothing's clicking, it sure makes life feel meaningless, right? But ultimately, you get to decide what is a meaningful life for you. And I've had periods of time where I felt that way as well. And sometimes I've still been able to find meaning through other inputs. Maybe that input was cognition. Maybe that input was physical sensations. If you can't feel your feelings, as in your emotions, what do you still have? Do you still have your intellect? Can you use your intellect to build meaning? Do you still have empathy? Can you use your empathy to build meaning? Can you like physically create something? Can you do something creative? Can you logically see that the things you're doing make a difference to someone or something, even if it doesn't connect with you emotionally? In one of my videos on anhedonia, I mentioned this too. you never know what's going to happen in the future, right? Kind of going back to what we said earlier. And sometimes things that don't make you feel anything right away make you feel something later on. And doing things that have the potential to create positive emotions, you can almost like bank them for later. And sometimes 10 years later, you look back on something you did that at the time meant nothing to you. And you look back on it when you're in a different state, when you have more access to your emotions, and then they're there. And you're like, oh man, it feels good to me now that I did that then. So try to keep banking up those things, even if they're not producing the desired or the expected emotional reaction for you right now, knowing that they might later. But really, I think the most important thing is that you get to define meaning and purpose for yourself. That kind of goes back to the not cookie cutter life thing. I know a guy whose meaning in life is building habitats for ducks. Once upon a time, I thought my meaning in life was going to be spending as much time as possible like on the water and just like farming and living off the land and living in the woods and seeing as few people as possible. Like being a hermit was basically my goal. And although it's not what I ended up doing, I think I could have found meaning in that life as well. So you get to choose. You don't have to ascribe to anyone else's definition of what a meaningful life is. I know a lot of people are going to tell you meaning is, finding a partner. Meaning is having kids. Well, for a lot of people it is, and that's cool. It can be. It doesn't have to be. Not everyone wants those things. Not everyone needs those things. The most popular comment on the announcement about this was around relationships. And I think specifically like asexuality or sexual trauma was something that was mentioned a lot. And like, what if I never find a partner? Or what if I find a partner, but we can't ever have any intimacy? Is it still possible for me to have a meaningful life or healthy relationships in absence of those things? Of course it is. Those things aren't requirements for all people. Those are common. Like there are certain things in life that most people say, I want this, right? But it doesn't matter what most people want. You don't have to be the mean, mean meaning the statistical average. You don't have to just be a mean human. You get to pick and choose, just like I did. You get to select, or some of it's not selection. I know, like I don't, from my understanding, asexuality is not a choice necessarily. But if you identify as asexual, then you can live a life built around that. I identified as antisocial for a long time. I know it's not the same thing. I'm not saying it's comparable, but I was prepared to build a life around the fact that I like trees and water and like bears more than humans. That was the goal for a long time. And I was pretty darn determined to make that work. And I still think I could have if I had to. You get to decide. No one else gets to pick for you. What else we got here? Do you think people should tell their family about a mental health diagnosis? That depends on who your family is. That's a hard question. Maybe. That's the answer to that question. If your family is like mental health savvy, and like safe and supportive and wants to help, then probably yes. If they are invalidating and gaslighty and like not interested in helping you, probably not. So without knowing who your family is, I can't say that. I think it could be either depending on who they are. Is wanting to live alone in the woods unhealthy? Stuart, no, it's not. Unless you don't actually want it. That's the thing. I believe that is the ideal lifestyle for some people. What gets us into trouble is when we try to force ourselves into a life that doesn't fit for us. If you are a really extroverted social person who cannot be happy in solitude, don't go live alone in the woods. But if you are, go for it. I literally know people who live that life, and they are some of the happiest, most fulfilled people who I know. Don't try to make yourself be something you're not. Don't try to live a life that doesn't feel good to you, that doesn't fit for you. Learn who you are. Like, be interested and be curious about what actually works for me and what doesn't. And respect that. Respect the information that you gain from looking inward and figuring out what has felt good and what is not, what makes sense to me and what doesn't, what life do I align with. Eh, Your answer may be unique. You may be like me, and like the Venn diagram where all your stuff intersects might literally just be you, and that's okay. That's okay. There is nothing wrong with that. Try to get one or two more here. Oh, that's a long question. I don't think I have time for that one. Hello, Dr. Scott. I've realized that romanticizing the future outcomes of my life constantly has been ruining my life. Do you have any advice you'd want to give? Yes. And it's going to be the most obvious thing in the world, but you gotta stop doing that. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I get it. I used to do this so much. I still do it sometimes. But it's romanticizing the future is basically just a slightly more mild version of a fantasy world, right? Of a fantasy life. And the problem is it feels really good while you do it. It's a self-reinforcing behavior. But then when that moment actually comes and it's not as good as the idealized, romanticized version you pictured, then you're disappointed. And it really sucks to prepare, like be excited for something and put a lot of hard work into it and then be disappointed. And so, in order to avoid essentially sabotaging your own progress, I would encourage you to try to develop really good conscious awareness of when you're doing it, and then try to consciously pull yourself back from it by saying, maybe you're probably gonna have to like actually explain it. Maybe you say something to yourself like, I'm recognizing right now that I have a desire to engage in this behavior because it feels good, but I've done this long enough to know that this doesn't actually work out well for me, and so I'm going to try really hard right now not to do it. um, but romanticizing is all I have. No, it isn't. No, it's not. And the only way you can ever discover that, though, is to experience your actual life without the romanticization. That's a hard word to say. It's not all you have. How are you ever going to know that if you keep doing it? That's like dating two people at once. It is. It's having one foot in and one foot out. You never fully experience one option if you're at least partially invested in another option. And so if you romanticize your life constantly, you never actually fully experience your life. And as long as you don't fully experience your life, then you are not fully committed to your own life, because you always have an exit. You always have a way out. And as long as you have a way out, you don't actually have to stay in your life and in your mind and in your body. And that's ultimately a big part of what keeps people stuck. Yes, I agree. It's I would even say it is a form of maladaptive daydreaming. I would say it literally is maladaptive daydreaming. If you create a fantasy that your life cannot live up to, your life will always feel subpar. And I'm not saying that's the only reason. I'm not saying, oh, if you just stop doing that, your life is going to suddenly feel awesome. No, I know it's not that simple. It's one of those multifactorial things. It's going to be probably one of many steps that eventually start to change that reality for you. Yes, I agree. People should not be told it gets better. That statement implies that like this is just a waiting game, and if you just stick around long enough, your life will automatically improve. I don't think that's true at all. I wouldn't even go so far as to say I think the opposite is true. I think if you just continue to exist, but that's it, and your only plan is like, I'm just going to wait this out, I actually think life tends to get worse when we do that, not better. But life can get better. It requires active involvement from you, and it requires you to actually be engaged with your life. And the more invested in a fantasy world or maladaptive daydreaming or a romanticized version of your future that you are, the less invested you will be in like this that you actually have. And it's always going to seem like crap compared to this. And when it lets you down, you're not going to want to work on it. It's going to feel like trying to like fix up the junker car in your garage that seems like it's never going to run. But what if that was your only car? What if the only car you had was the one that didn't run, and there's no way you could get anywhere else unless you fix up that car? Then you might actually get that car running, right? But if you have a working car, You don't really work on the project car very much because you don't need it, because you've got an out. You've got another avenue. I get that this is tough. This is not, I know I'm not going to like fix a bunch of problems in an hour, but I hope that some of these ideas at least make some amount of sense to you, and challenge some of the rampant hopelessness that this world so thoroughly beats into us. Because I get it, you guys. I really do. I wish I could have answered all your questions. I just want to say before I go, I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate your participation today, your comments, your questions, just everything. It's just knowing that people are interested in what I'm saying, honestly, like just means the world to me. So thank you guys for being here. I wish I could have said more. I wish I could have answered more questions. I'm going to get back to work, and I'm going to do everything I can to help and just keep putting this stuff out there. So take care. I'll see you guys next time. For those of you who joined late, this will be actually like on the channel uploaded too. So you can watch it later. All right. Take care, guys. Thank you. Bye.